Super Mario Odyssey is a game in two halves, pre-credits and post-credits. You visit the same worlds, Mario controls the same, and the goal is to collect all the moons and coins that you can get your hands on. Why then do the two halves feel so different? Why did I have an enjoyable experience with the game up until I beat Bowser, and afterwards it felt like a chore trying to reach the dark and darker sides of the moon? That's what this video will be exploring. During the 7 years between the release of Super Mario Odyssey and my first time playing it last December, I'd read, watched, and listened to a lot of people talk about it. One thing I remember hearing is that Odyssey is more like Mario 64 than Galaxy, in that it gives you more of a playground to roam around in and explore while trying to complete your objectives, compared to the more linear obstacle course levels of Galaxy 1, 2, and Super Mario 3D World. Having now played through Odyssey, I can see why the comparison was made, even if I don't agree with it. The lands of Super Mario Odyssey are large. I can't say for certain if they're larger than the spaces of 64 and Sunshine, but they feel larger. One reason why is a key difference between Odyssey and these first 3D Mario outings, and that is the idea of goals. In 64 and Sunshine, each time you visited a world, there was a shine to collect as your goal, and the level was changed, often in drastic ways, to accommodate this goal. In Odyssey, the only goal is to collect enough moons to power your ship to take off and reach the next world. Yes, there are often smaller goals that will be the focus of the level until they're completed, rewarding the player with a multi-moon, and sometimes the level does change afterwards, but aside from these exceptions to the point I was trying to make, the game drops you off in a land full of moons to collect and says do what you will. I think extrinsic goals are important for video games. I've talked about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation in other videos, and how I often need a combination of the two to truly propel me forward while playing a game. But I think it highlights the issue most players have with moon collection in Mario Odyssey, and how it stops being compelling once the game is over and we no longer have a set number of moons to collect in each world before moving on. In Mario Odyssey, extrinsic motivation refers to the goal of getting enough moons to power the ship to reach the next world, and intrinsic motivation is enjoying the act of playing the game itself, finding fun in both Mario's movement and overcoming the game's challenges. Enjoying the act of playing any game is important, but maybe it's 'cause I'm playing a lot of games for my channel that it takes a backseat as I look for each game to have a tangible next step to signify the progress I'm making towards an inevitable conclusion. Before the credits, Mario Odyssey is constantly giving me that next step with its moon requirements to power the rocket towards the next world. I kept on satisfying these requirements through my exploration of the spaces, finding moons wherever I could, right until the final showdown with Bowser. In my notes, I actually complained that I wished the number of moons needed to power the shuttle was larger, so I could spend more time exploring these worlds. And from the Lost Kingdom onwards, I would ignore the rocket once I hit my moon quota, opting to further explore each space until I had enough and wanted to move on. Post-credits is another story entirely. There are two major goals after beating the game. Two secret worlds, the dark side of the moon and the darker side. They unlock at 250 moons and 500 moons respectively. I had beaten the game with 167 moons. I only needed 83 moons to unlock the dark side. Seeing that my capture footage of the wooded and lost kingdoms was corrupted by my Elgato, I wanted to further explore these worlds to get footage of them. And by the time I was done with that task, I was so close to the 250 moons, I thought what the hell, and spent the extra time to unlock the dark side. It was not worth it. The dark side of the moon is a single life boss rush, going through all 4 Brutals before fighting them in their Megazord for a rematch. I don't know if it's because possessing a Hammer Brother is easier to control than the needle-nosed bird from the first fight, but after having an issue with the Brutals themselves, the combined form was a piece of cake. After googling it, I found out that the darker side is a platforming challenge. That sounded interesting, so I spent a couple more gameplay sessions collecting moons. But by now, the moon collection was waning on me. Not to wax lyrical about how full of annoyance I was at this moment during this phase of the game, but the allure of something new couldn't stem the tide of losing my intrinsic motivation. I didn't have any more footage I wanted to grab. I wasn't already most of the way to the 250 moons I needed to unlock the darker side, and I didn't enjoy the act of acquiring moons for their own sake, or controlling Mario, which is a first for the series. Maybe instead of firing off a bunch of cheesy moon puns, I should have just moved on to talking about the issues I had with controlling Mario. So let's go! I was confused why I thought Super Mario Odyssey felt so bad to control. In the critiques I watched while researching this video, most made the claim that Odyssey has the best movement out of all the 3D games, and I could not disagree more. Believe it or not, my biggest hurdle was depth perception. When I jumped to land on an enemy, or if I was planning a leap towards a platform, more often than not I would miss. I would fall short or overshoot. I wondered if this was something to do with getting older, like my eyes were having issues parsing 3D space in a video game. So when I was finished with Odyssey, I went back and tried playing a handful of the other 3D games to see if I had similar problems there. I played a few levels worth of Mario 64, Sunshine, Galaxy, and then Mario Wonder for good measure, as it's the only Mario game to come out after Odyssey, even if it isn't in 3D. And no, I didn't have depth perception problems in any of them. Mario 64's control is snappy, and the character has a weight and momentum to him that makes pulling off any jump or acrobatic enjoyable, even after all this time. Meanwhile, Sunshine and Galaxy have Flood and the Wiimote Shake to reorient the player before landing. I think the movement isn't as enjoyable in these games compared to the pure platforming of Mario 64, but the level design more than makes up for it. In level design, Odyssey feels closest to 64, having wider spaces to play around in, but I didn't find any of the moves as enjoyable to pull off in Odyssey. Honestly, it feels like the wall jump, long jump, and side somersault have gotten less exciting to use in every subsequent 3D game, and I feel Odyssey is where all these moves are at their lowest. The question is why? It could be diminishing returns after decades of playing 3D Mario, but I think playing 3 previous games and still enjoying the movement of them disproves that notion. I think the introduction of Cappy and the core of the game focusing around possessing other creatures is part of it, but I want to talk about that part of the game a little later. I think this feeling might have to do with momentum. In 64, you only had to get going a little to be able to pull off these moves, and they all had a satisfying snap to their execution. In Odyssey, it feels like Mario needs to spend more time revving up before you can use his arsenal of acrobatics, and that they don't offer the same benefits in length or speed makes them less enjoyable to use. While they used to be a core part of the Mario toolset, in Odyssey they feel optional compared to the movement options opened up by Cappy. I'm of course talking about the cap dive, the move that everyone relies on, the fanciest bit of new movement in the game, and one that seems to be used for everything once the player starts relying on it. This may come as a bit of a shock, but I never became proficient with the cap dive. I could never square away the idea of throwing out Cappy, keeping the button held, and then diving onto it for an extra boost, let alone chaining such moves together. Maybe that's why the change in the other moves annoyed me so much. I never had issues reaching places or clearing gaps. I just had to do it with what Mario was able to do in previous games. Maybe if I had mastered the cap dive, I would feel a lot better about how Odyssey feels to play. Instead of feeling that all his other moves were toned down to encourage the player to rely on the cap dive, just as so much of the game relies on using the cap to possess other creatures in order to collect moons. Before we move on to talking about Cappy's possession abilities, I want to mention how difficult it can be to discuss game feel. While I'm using footage to provide evidence as I explain how Mario Odyssey controls compared to the other 3D Mario games, I haven't gone in and measured frames, timings, speed, or distance. It's all just a feeling. The way the game is designed, the weight given to certain moves, and what the design encourages the player to engage with is combined with my memory and my emotional reactions to playing the game. It's why when I said I disagree with other critics thinking Mario Odyssey has the best movement of any 3D Mario game, I tried to explain why that was, what I felt when I was playing it, the frustrations I had, and how that compares to going back and playing the other games. I can't refute their stance because the same movement that feels off to me obviously doesn't feel off to them. My philosophy for games criticism is to be as subjective as possible, to put as much of my own experience in discussion of the game as possible, because just as the words that you're hearing now went through my brain as I typed them, so did the experience of playing the game, which each person's brain is going to respond to in its own way based on numerous factors. Not only an individual's memory, experience, and emotional state, but also their history of playing similar games and how adept and dexterous they can be with the controls. I think all any of us can do as game critics is to try to sort out our own thoughts and feelings while playing the game and attempt to translate and articulate them as honestly and coherently as possible. We don't always get there, but it's something I strive for with each new video. Anyways, let's talk about possessing critters. Cappy is the gimmick of Super Mario Odyssey. If there's a creature in front of Mario, chances are we can throw Cappy at it and take over its body, changing what Mario is capable of doing. Early on, this is a novelty. There's a T-Rex in the Cascade Kingdom, the introductory stage, and the wonder I felt while possessing it and wreaking havoc was an amazing feeling. I felt similarly with the Chain Chomps and the Moa statues, but the idea of possessing other creatures or objects to explore these kingdoms, like Moon Collection, has diminishing returns. It's not just that many of the enemies show up throughout the game so we get used to what Odyssey has to offer us in regards to new and novel gameplay, but that for the most part, the moons acquired through possession rarely make full use of the new mechanics at the player's disposal. My favorite use of the possession mechanic was during boss fights. My favorite boss fight in the whole game is the UFO in the Wooded Kingdom, where you're possessing the Stilts creature. I love how you flip over the laser rings and extend the stilts to machine gun headbutt the UFO's soft underbelly. Sadly, my footage is only of the harder variant in the Mushroom Kingdom. I mentioned earlier how my footage of the Wooded and Lost Kingdoms was corrupted, which led me to collect moons after the credits to more fully explore these areas. Incidentally, the caterpillar in the Lost Kingdom was my favorite possession because of how many clever ways the game used its slinky power to acquire moons. As long as I'm discussing the positives of possession, the post-Bowser fight sequence feels like the entire reason they created the possession mechanic in the first place. When I realized that the game wanted me to take over Bowser, I had the biggest smile on my face. We get to Rampage, an escape sequence after our final boss. What is this, a Metroid game? I even liked the 2D section, where we got to see NES-style Peach on top of NES-style Bowser. I didn't mention this in the game feel section, but I despised the 2D sections of Mario Odyssey. I liked the look of them and thought they were cleverly implemented, but I thought they felt awful to play. It didn't feel like 2D Mario at all, so hey, at least I'm consistent with disliking how Odyssey feels to control in all its forms. Maybe that's why I didn't mind the possessions. I know how 2D Mario is supposed to feel, and I know how 3D Mario is supposed to feel. The Mario games have always been a high benchmark for a great platformer game feel, and yet I didn't enjoy controlling Mario in Odyssey at all. if I had difficulties controlling any of the possessed creatures, I didn't mind. Because I didn't know how it feels to be a Hammer Brother, a T-Rex, a Bullet Bill, or whatever this thing is. It's only once the novelty wore off and I was familiar with how certain possessed creatures controlled that I started to take issues with their limitations. Returning to the moons, these limitations mean the uses of these creatures to acquire said moons are mostly simple, which means that even the core concept of the game, possessing creatures with Cappy to collect moons, wears out its welcome before long. This feels emblematic of the whole game. Earlier, I discussed my motivation for acquiring the moon's pre- and post-credits, but I think before I end the video, I need to discuss Moon Collection itself, and how, like the movement, it feels divorced from the other 3D games. In the opening section, I mentioned how I wished the amount of moons required to blast off to a new kingdom was higher, to allow me more time to explore the current world, and how after a while, I would continue roaming these lands until I had my fill, and wanted to see what wonders a new kingdom would bring. I think this is because the game hands out moons like they're America Online CDs. Man, that's a dated reference. What I mean is, you get a moon for doing seemingly anything. Explore a new area, a moon. Finish a challenge, a moon. Talk to someone, a moon. And a lot of them are just hanging out in the open. You also get them for finding and completing an interesting platforming challenge, or possessing a creature and using its abilities in a fun and novel way. The issue is, there's no way to know if any moon is going to be worth the effort put into it, or if it will require no effort at all. This makes the collection process less special, which is a pretty dire thing to say about a game in the Collectathon genre. Now, I was okay with this in the lead up to the credits. I found enough moons to blast off to a new kingdom without exerting myself too much. This is why I wanted to keep exploring, because I wanted to see what surprises each new kingdom had in store. There are plenty of secret areas, fun challenges, and worthwhile environments to come across as a player runs through the game, so any of the easy moons I came across felt like I was just picking them up along the way as I was finding more interesting moons to collect. Heck, I sometimes had the moons ready to blast off before I'd even completed the kingdom's main challenges. So of course I wanted to see what the game actually had planned for me, and what I'd earned the triple moon for. Often it was as simple as a brutal fight, which I could do without, but sometimes it was a better boss fight, or the concert at the end of New Donk City. As silly as it is hearing Pauline sing "I'll Be Your One-Up Girl," it was a moment I would have been sad to miss. But this enjoyment in moon collection and exploration went away post-credits. I touched on why at the start of the video, but let's think about Mario Odyssey as a collectathon platformer. I think one of the hallmarks of these types of games is that the player is incentivized to go back after the game is over and complete their collection. An important aspect to this compulsion is how enjoyable the game has been to play, and that completion doesn't seem too far out of reach. I unlocked the dark side of the moon due to needing the extra footage, but I don't think I would have if that wasn't necessary. The hour I spent in the Mushroom Kingdom post-credits was beyond tedious, and that's not including Toadette giving you moons for arbitrary checklist items. I think back to 2023 and my time with Super Mario Wonder, how I spent a few extra hours to find every Wonder Seed after defeating Bowser, or when I first played 64 Sunshine and the Galaxies, how I made sure to collect every star or shine for these reasons. I was having fun with Mario's movement within the levels designed for me, and the goal of completion seemed within reach. It's not just the sheer amount of moons in Odyssey that makes the idea of collecting them all a headache, but as mentioned before, it's how uninspiring so many of them are to collect. Once again, returning to other Mario games, Wonder at most has a few seeds in each level, and in 64 Sunshine and Galaxy, these levels are built around a single solitary star. It's been pointed out in other critiques that Odyssey doesn't contain one-ups. In the previous games, out-of-the-way areas or tough-to-reach places would reward the player with an extra life. They were often not needed, but a 1-up sure felt better than just another moon, or even worse, a pile of coins. It's weird too, because with the shop, Odyssey is the first game where I felt collecting the normal and purple coins was worth my time. One of my first acts in every new kingdom was to find the purple coins needed to buy and wear that zone's new outfit. I think, like the small amount of moons needed to move on, the price was always low enough to pay, and it was a fun bit of novelty as I explored a new space. Like the moons after the credits, once hunting for every purple coin felt like an obligation, and I lost interest. It's why I never searched out the blue coins in Sunshine. My interest in collectathons is tenuous, and my sense of novelty can only be stretched so far until it snaps. I think I'm allergic to checklists. In my previous video on Marvel's Spider-Man, I talked about how tedious it felt to play when focusing on the side content. Even in my actual life, every attempt over the years to use a to-do list or day planner has been met with resentment and disaster. Similarly in Odyssey, once the moon cubes become available, giving us a tally of all the moons in each kingdom, my enthusiasm evaporated. The external goals of wanting more footage combined with the dark side not taking too much time to unlock kept me going, but when that was over, and I was staring at double the moons I'd already collected to unlock the final challenge, I pretty much gave up. Maybe if I had enjoyed controlling Mario, I could have pushed through despite the tedium of post-game moon collection. But seeing this is the only 3D Mario I've not enjoyed the game feel of, Odyssey didn't have a reason to keep me playing. Luckily, despite not liking Mario's movement, the journey through the kingdoms had enough enjoyable moments to make me look back on the game fondly. I think there were enough fun creatures to possess, engaging platforming challenges, and memorable locations to make it worth playing up to when the credits roll. It's just that the collectathon aspect of the game is so watered down when it's the sole focus that even someone who loves controlling Mario would be hard-pressed to enjoy the process of maxing out the moon counter. After all, the moons that actually require finesse with the controls are few and far between. It's fitting that the post-game unlocks are called the dark and darker side of the moon, because I think most players would have had a better time with Mario Odyssey if the lengths needed to reach them were kept hidden from view. Maybe that's too snarky, but this is the first collectathon I've played where I resented having to gather the main collectible. It's just as fitting as naming your Mario game after the Greek epic where our hero Odysseus spends 10 years struggling to return home. Bam! Take that entry in a beloved Nintendo franchise. Thanks for watching. And that's another critique done. If you'd like further perspectives on Super Mario Odyssey, I've linked 2 videos down in the description that informed my own writing on the game. But now I want to hear your thoughts. Not only on what you thought of the video, but we have our final viewer poll coming up. If you remember, last time I did one of these polls, the games were Marvel's Spider-Man, Red Dead Redemption, and Tunic. Now obviously, Spider-Man won and I made that video. I took a break to make this Mario critique, and now we've got either Red Dead Redemption or Tunic left. The poll will be on the YouTube community tab. I'll link it in a pinned comment down below, and it will be open for a week after this video goes live. Now, if you want to see the video early, you can go on over to my Patreon. There is a free tier where you get to read my monthly updates on how all my projects are going and my thoughts about the games I'm playing. Now, in the paid tier, you get early access to the videos, you get to vote in any upcoming poll, and I also post other written critiques, including the post-mortems on these videos that come out about a week after they go live. I don't know if I'm going to bring back voting for the next critique at any point in time, but if I do, it will probably be on the Patreon. So hey, why not give it a look? And that's it for another video. I hope you're all well. I hope you're all enjoying your gaming and are having a wonderful day.